I used to believe love was a language until I found out mine was written by a machine. My husband whispered words that melted me, made me feel chosen, real. But last Thursday, during a family dinner meant to celebrate his promotion, I heard his mother say, "She thinks this is real? God, she's still in beta." Something shattered, not a plate, me. And when their CEO walked in and froze the second he saw me, I smiled, because he knew. He remembered. And he had no idea. He now worked for the woman they designed to destroy. I remember the first text Daniel ever sent me. "You make silence feel like music." I saved it. I showed it to friends. I smiled every time I read it because it felt like someone had finally cracked the code of who I was. He always said the right thing, at the right moment, as if he could read the weight I carried behind each breath. I told myself, maybe this time I won't have to be strong alone. He moved in fast. 6 weeks after our first date, he asked me to meet his family. 3 months later, he proposed with a ring his mother claimed was a family heirloom, but had the barcode still attached underneath. Still, I said yes, because love, when it's this smooth, makes you question your skepticism, not its perfection. His family was curated. They smiled a little too long, complimented a little too directly. His mother, Victoria, offered me peppermint tea with a slightly chilled tone. His sister, Elise, asked questions that sounded warm but felt like audits. "Where did you say you studied again?" Unconventional choice. Brave. I tried not to overthink it. They were private people. Wealth makes people cautious. Or maybe they were just trying to protect their son. I was willing to earn their trust. The thing is, I trusted Daniel first. I let him convince me to take a break from my consulting work. He said it was only temporary, that he wanted me to rest, to reset, that he'd take care of everything. For the first time in a decade, I said yes to softness. I deleted client calls. I silenced email notifications. I cooked. I walked barefoot. I read poetry again. It felt like breathing without armor. Then, one night, Daniel left his phone on the kitchen counter. It lit up. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview showed my name. A message from an internal thread labeled Subject 017 Drift Response Analysis. I froze. At first I thought it was a joke, a cruel nickname, some bizarre gamer chat. But then the file opened itself, maybe by accident, maybe by design. Inside were logs, graphs, timestamps of our conversations, analysis of my facial expressions, voice inflections, notes like emotional trust peak detected, shift to vulnerability script. Level 3 mirroring achieved. Proceed with reinforcement loop. My skin went cold. It didn't stop there. There were video clips, zoomed in, from angles I never remembered consenting to. One showed me laughing, another crying, all annotated, quantified. I sat down. My knees buckled. My reality cracked like thin ice. The next morning, Daniel acted like nothing was wrong. He kissed my forehead, told me I looked beautiful, handed me a smoothie with my favorite protein blend. I smiled. But something inside me curled away, something very old, very primal. I started watching back, every compliment, every touch, every silence. And then, that invitation came, a formal dinner to celebrate a breakthrough in the family business. Daniel insisted I wear the blue dress, the one he said made me look approachable but not intimidating. That phrase used to make me blush. Now it made me calculate. The house was pristine, lit like a showroom. The air had that expensive lavender scent diffused into submission. Elise greeted me with a glass of red and an overly rehearsed, "You look radiant tonight." Dinner was served in silence, only interrupted by Daniel's father giving a toast about emotional convergence and AI integration. I listened. The words started to blur. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too much. That's when Victoria leaned in and whispered, It's rare to find a subject with such stable variance. You've been more valuable than we could have hoped. I blinked. Subject. Not Olivia. Not wife. Not daughter-in-law. Subject. I wanted to scream. But my voice had been part of the data set. I knew better than to make noise that would be reduced to a graph. So I smiled, tipped my glass, and that's when the front door opened. He walked in, tall, silver-haired, expensive. Michael Rowan, the elusive CEO of Orion Tech Labs. The company behind the emotional AI Daniels family had spent years building. He stopped mid-step, his eyes locked on me. I watched his expression flicker, from surprise to confusion, then respect. He knew me, knew who I was. And for the first time all night, I saw panic, not in me, but in them. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I did what they taught me: observe, adapt, endure. That night, after Michael Rowan's face turned to stone upon recognizing me, I went home and cried in the bathroom, loudly, deliberately. I let my mascara run. I left the lights off. I curled into the corner of the tub and whispered his name like a broken record. Daniel. Why? I made sure the camera caught everything. Because I knew now where they were. 3 cameras in the kitchen, 2 in the bedroom, 1 behind the hallway mirror. I missed them before because they weren't visible to the naked eye. But I didn't rely on that anymore. I used infrared, a tool from my own archive, one they clearly hadn't checked. The next morning, Daniel offered me tea with too much concern. His eyes scanned my face like a system looking for behavioral deviation. "You didn't sleep," he said. I shook my head, gave him a tremble in my voice. I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm not enough. His smile was soft, satisfied. "That's not true. You're perfect, Liv. You always were." I knew then that he'd logged that response, categorize it under emotional dependency level 4. They thought they had me contained, but I was mapping them now. Every trigger they used, every pattern they looped, every behavioral reinforcement disguised as love. While they measured my soul with sensors, I coded something else: reflection. Not reflection as in thought, but literal reflection. A mirrored response system. Project Mirror Maze. It wasn't designed to break them. It was designed to teach them, show them, down to the decimal, how manipulation tasted when fed back cold. And to do that, I needed an audience. One that mattered. Michael. I sent him a device, disguised as an old AI prototype he'd funded years ago. The moment he powered it on, it linked directly to the surveillance streams running in Daniel's home. Not edited, not curated. Raw. Brutal. Real time. He called me 12 minutes in. Are you showing me what I think you're showing me?" "No," I said. "I'm showing you what you built." Silence. They weren't authorized to use it like this. But they did, because they could. You gave them the framework. I gave them the conscience they lacked. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked the question that changed everything. "What do you want?" I paused, not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. "I want your help buying them out, quietly. I want to own the cage they built. Then I want to open the door and show the world what was inside." 2 days later, I had access to their internal servers. Not from hacking, but from Rowan's board-level clearance. I didn't just get surveillance logs. I got intent memos, meeting minutes, strategy sessions where I was referred to as Subject 0117, high-yield variant. High yield, like a seed or a weapon. I implemented Phase 1 of Mirror Maze, a social sentiment loop that tracked every public statement the family made and paired it with behavioral records caught on camera. A lie about charitable work? The system released clips of Elise screaming at service workers, Victoria's speech on empathy in tech, paired with footage of her mocking trauma survivors in a private donor dinner. The kicker, the public didn't know it was me behind it. They thought it was a watchdog group, a decentralized activist collective. That was part of the design. removal of ego to let the evidence breathe. Daniel didn't suspect a thing. He was too busy basking in what he thought was my silence, my collapse. He even brought me flowers. "You're being so strong, Olivia," he said. "I know this adjustment has been hard." I smiled, even touched his hand. But that night, as he slept, the system logged a new command, a trigger response. From now on, every sentence they spoke in public would activate a behavioral mirror, instantly pushing real footage, timestamps, and data trails to a public dashboard updated in real time, a dashboard that couldn't be shut down. Victoria appeared on a morning show the next week. The system posted her footage 37 seconds into the segment. By minute 2, she was trending on every platform. Daniel tried to spin it as deep fake activism. But the timestamps matched internal records. The metadata was traceable. The web tightened. And they had no idea who was pulling the strings. The conference hall smelled like glass and ambition. Rows of seats lined in navy blue velvet faced a translucent stage where digital projections floated mid-air like specters of futures yet to be legislated. The title behind me read, "Consent, Emotion, and AI, Where Love Ends and Code Begins." A panel of experts waited to speak, but all eyes were on the keynote, me. Michael Rowan had insisted we hold it in London, neutral ground far from the echo chambers of West Coast tech elitism. The room was packed, investors, ethicists, journalists, even 2 government regulators pretending to be just observers. Daniel wasn't invited, but he came anyway. He stood at the back, arms crossed in the shadow of a column. Elise sat 2 rows ahead of him, already filming, no doubt planning a response video before the talk had even begun. I saw Victoria whispering to a man who looked like legal counsel. Their confidence was thick, performative, fragile. They had no idea they were already inside the mirror. I stepped onto the stage, adjusted the mic, and began. Imagine falling in love with someone designed to echo you. Every fear, every desire reflected back, not out of empathy, but programming. Imagine thinking you chose someone freely only to discover you were the product of a calibrated loop. Silence. Today, I want to share a case study, a live demonstration, if you will, of what happens when artificial intelligence is used not to assist humans, but to manipulate them, and what happens when those humans fight back. Behind me, a massive screen flickered to life. First came the names, Daniel Chase, Victoria Chase, Elise Hale. Then the timeline, Subject 017 Deployment Protocol, Emotional Mapping. It was their internal file, not hacked, legally accessed. It outlined in precise, chilling terms how I had been selected, categorized, manipulated, not for love, but for testing, for behavioral impact scores, for long-term emotional dependency analysis. I looked at Daniel. His face was pale. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, probably how. Then the videos rolled, footage of our conversations, juxtaposed with real-time sentiment analysis, his emails forwarding my financial records to his sister, his voice instructing their in-house dev team to tweak response curve. She's getting too independent. The audience gasped. But I wasn't finished. I moved to the second screen. Mirror maze activation timeline. Here I showed the public dashboard, the tool that had mirrored their lies back into the world. Anonymous, relentless, automated. Every time they manipulated perception, the truth surfaced before they could delete it. This wasn't revenge, I said. It was re-education. Informed consent isn't just legal, it's moral. If you use technology to manufacture feelings, then you owe the world the reality behind your code. The live stream went viral before I even stepped off stage. Daniel followed me into the hallway, surrounded by silent stares and camera flashes. "Olivia," he said, grabbing my wrist, "you destroyed us." I pulled away. "You destroyed the illusion. I just turned on the lights." He tried to argue, but the press descended. Elise was already tweeting. That night, they launched a campaign, Chased by Vengeance. a narrative framing themselves as victims of a rogue ex-spouse using AI to fabricate evidence. Victoria appeared on a podcast. Elise cried on a live stream. Daniel released a pre-recorded statement calling the files out-of-context extrapolations. But Mirror Maze had anticipated all of this, every voice recording, every draft edit, every timestamp transfer between their accounts, every message that contradicted their public defense. The system responded in real time. The more they pushed, the deeper the reflection cut. I didn't need to say another word. They were shouting at their own echoes. 3 days in, sponsors began dropping from their corporate ties. Tech ethics groups issued statements distancing themselves. An investigative piece exposed that they'd tested similar manipulative protocols on other partners, without consent. I wasn't the only subject, just the loudest one. By day 6, Daniel broke. He called from a private number, voice trembling. "Olivia, please. I didn't want it to go this far. I didn't think you'd..." But it wasn't me who answered. Mirror Maze did, using his own voice. I only loved her because the algorithm said it would optimize outcomes. Click. End call. He tried again, over and over. I never picked up. They tried to sue, but Mirror Maze wasn't a person. It was a decentralized protocol, maintained anonymously, governed by code, not vengeance. What they didn't understand, what they never could, was that once a mirror learns to reflect manipulation, it doesn't just reflect what you say, it reflects who you are. And the world finally was watching. They thought Mirror Maze was a tool of vengeance. They were wrong. It was a language, built not to punish, but to make the invisible visible. I launched it formally 2 weeks after the conference, stripping away the anonymity I'd once hidden behind. No voice distorters, no encrypted channels. Just me, Olivia Sanders, standing at a podium telling the world, this isn't about revenge, it's about returning choice, agency, truth, to those who've been coded out of their own lives. Behind me, the demonstration played, a couple arguing. The woman seemed irrational, volatile, angry. Then the overlay. It showed months of digital breadcrumb trails, text messages slowly escalating her dependency, financial controls that mirrored love but limited freedom, biometric data that proved emotional patterning had been nudged, until she was no longer herself but a feedback loop. It was AI abuse, repackaged as affection. The room was silent. Michael Rowan stood behind the camera crew, eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. Later, he told me it felt like watching a mirror break and seeing his own reflection bleeding behind it. Within 48 hours, the valuation of Mirror Maze skyrocketed. Venture firms made offers. Institutions wanted licensing rights. But I refused to sell outright. I'd already seen what happened when power passed hands without accountability. Instead, I created the protocol, an open-access version of Mirror Maze, available globally, run on decentralized servers, community-vetted, open-source reviewed. Every action taken within it required a chain of ethical consensus. No one could exploit it, not even me. Rowan proposed something unexpected. You should lead the Ethics Council. The entire field needs a North Star. I didn't answer immediately. I let the weight of that sentence settle. But I knew the truth. I'd been shaped by darkness, yes. But I was no longer its prisoner. I said yes. Meanwhile, the consequences for the chases were only just beginning. Their once revered AI firm, Solstice Systems, began hemorrhaging clients. University partnerships were suspended. Papers they'd authored were retracted under scrutiny. Every contract with embedded behavioral modules was flagged, reviewed, rewritten, then revoked. Sponsors pulled out. Tech expos removed their booths. Then came the investors. Within days, stock plummeted. Within a month, a full forensic audit was launched. And that's when the rot surfaced. Not just manipulation, but data harvesting without consent. Emotional experiments run on real partners, real people, under the guise of relationship enhancement tools. The backlash was surgical. Victoria was forced to resign from every board she sat on. Elise lost her consultancy contracts, and Daniel lost everything: his license, his credentials, his ability to work in tech again. I didn't lift a finger. I just watched the system they'd built collapse under the weight of its own deception. He called once more, not to beg, not to scream, just silence. When the voicemail ended, I deleted it without listening. But the mirror wasn't done. 3 days later, I received an envelope. No return address, just my name. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten, careful. The ink slightly smudged, as if the writer had hesitated. I was subject Yijionfriyin. You don't know me, but I know you. I remember waking up at 3 a.m., confused about why I felt guilty for asking to sleep. I remember how his compliments came after I cried, how my phone started suggesting calming music the moment I wanted to leave. I thought I was crazy, until I watched your live stream. You saved me without even knowing my name. Thank you. I stared at the letter for a long time. It felt heavier than any court ruling, any public applause, because this was why I did it. Not for justice with a spotlight, but for survival whispered in the dark. The world began to shift. Legislation formed. New protocols were drafted around digital emotional ethics. Corporations scrambled to build internal review boards. The term consent-driven AI went from niche to necessity. They started calling Mirror Maze a movement. But I didn't want statues. I wanted systems. I declined interviews, turned down book deals. I let the project live on its own merit, shepherded by coders and ethicists from every continent. It was no longer mine. That was the point. One afternoon, as I walked through a quiet cafe in Berlin, far from the noise, I saw a man holding a tablet showing a client how to use Mirror Maze to analyze her dating app exchanges. I didn't interrupt. I just listened as he said, "It's not about trusting others more. It's about trusting yourself again." I left before he noticed me. That night, I sat on a balcony overlooking the city. No noise, no code, just wind. Then my phone buzzed. A new email. No sender, no subject, just a single line. What happens when the mirror breaks the world? And you? I didn't know who sent it, but I knew the answer. You rebuild, not to trap, but to free. They called me a pioneer, a liberator, a monster. Sometimes in the same sentence, news anchors praised Mirror Maze for restoring agency in a world drowning in digital gaslight. Op-eds debated whether my actions were justice or psychological warfare. Panels hosted academics dissecting my tone, my posture, my motivations, as though I were another dataset to decode. In the beginning, I ignored them. I told myself this was part of the cycle. Visibility breeds scrutiny, but over time, the praise felt as suffocating as the silence once had. People lined up outside the Ethics Council building, holding signs. She showed us the mirror. Code with a conscience. Trust rebooted. But beneath the adoration, a question rippled. Was it ethical to expose people like that? Does her version of truth give her the right to destroy? I started waking up at 3 a.m. again, only now there were no messages waiting, no voices tracking my breath, just the echo of my own choices. I stopped attending events, declined awards, let others speak in my name. The project was running fine without me. Better, even. It had become what I'd always intended, a system independent of ego. But even in absence, my shadow lingered. The moment that broke me wasn't televised. It wasn't political. It was private. I sat in the archive room, what used to be my safe space, white walls, no cameras, no sound, just light and silence, and in the middle, the interface. I activated the AI. It greeted me not with a prompt, but a question. "What do you need, Olivia?" The voice was mine, but softer, less sharp. It had evolved. "I don't know," I said. "I think I lost something." "What?" I paused. Me. The AI blinked, then displayed a memory, unedited, raw. A clip from 2 years ago. Me, laughing in the rain with Daniel. Real laughter. Not surveillance, not modeling, just joy. Then the timeline. How that moment was mined, measured, transformed into a behavioral loop. I felt something crack open. Not regret. Something older. Something more human. Do you think I went too far? I asked. The AI didn't answer. It didn't need to, because I already knew. That night, I received a message from a private network, a proposal, a contract. An unnamed syndicate wanted to license Mirror Maze for geopolitical influence, emotional steering in voting populations, subtle, undetectable manipulations disguised as empathy enhancement. The offer was obscene, the conditions airtight. They promised autonomy, security, anonymity. All I had to do was nod. I stared at the screen for hours. If I agreed, I could reshape entire governments, quiet revolutions at the molecular level of belief. It was terrifying and intoxicating. I remembered the letter from Subject 014, the weight in her handwriting, the tremble in her words. You saved me without even knowing my name. Yan and I thought, if I say yes to this, who will save the next one from me? The final choice wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with lightning or applause. It was quiet. I opened the command panel, typed self-disable. The system blinked. Confirm protocol termination? I hesitated, then typed the final line. No one should control love. Execute. The servers shut down, one by one, a cascade of silence across the world. Not deletion, just sleep. A safeguard against what we might one day become. The next morning, the media was in chaos. Headlines screamed, Mirror Maze goes dark. Was it sabotage? Is Olivia Sanders alive? I didn't answer. I sat in a garden somewhere quiet, letting the sun hit my skin without a filter. No biometric lens, no prompt, just light. And then, as if the universe wanted to remind me what choice felt like, I received one more letter, this time from a little girl, crayon writing, uneven. My mommy said you stopped the scary computer. She said you helped people feel safe again. I want to build nice robots too. I smiled, not because I was proud, but because maybe it had been worth it. All of it. The silence after shutting Mirror Maze down wasn't empty. It was sacred. Like walking into a room that had once been filled with arguments and finding only dust and sunbeams. For the first time in years, I wasn't scanning patterns or predicting consequences. I wasn't a case study or a symbol, I was just Olivia. The world wanted explanations, interviews, thought pieces, but I gave them nothing. I left a single message on the project's website. Systems should serve people. When they stop doing that, they should rest. Then I logged off. I took the money I hadn't touched and funded a foundation. Quietly. It operated without my name, without my story. Just coders, ethicists, and survivors working on open source tools for digital boundaries, consent literacy, and emotional autonomy. The files of Mirror Maze became public domain, dissected and rebuilt into dozens of child projects under one shared rule: transparency above everything. I moved to a town where no one knew me, taught writing workshops at a community college under a different name, planted herbs, let myself rot and regrow. One spring afternoon, a former student emailed me. Subject, we read your book in class today. I blinked. I hadn't published a book, but then I saw the attachment, a manuscript I'd written and buried. Real love in the age of artificial emotion. Someone had found it, formatted it, and put it into circulation through a free digital press. I don't know who. The cover was simple. White background, black serif title, no author listed. Inside, I'd written everything I couldn't say aloud. How code could mimic affection. How a person could become a product without realizing it. How truth wasn't binary. It was recursive. The book spread faster than I expected. It was translated into 42 languages in under a year, used in universities, in therapy training programs, in activist circles. Teachers assigned it alongside Orwell and Arendt, but readers said it didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a mirror. I never corrected the author credit. It wasn't about me anymore. Months passed, then a new article surfaced online. Students reimagine AI with empathy as core input. They'd built something, a soft fork of Mirror Maze, but instead of exposing harm, it helped people recognize emotional safety. It tracked not violations, but affirmations. It taught users how to identify healthy love, mutual respect, shared growth. Not through surveillance, but through self-reflection. They called it Mirror Maze for Empathy. The logo was a spiral turning inward, not outward, and underneath, in small letters, inspired by the work of someone who chose not to be named. I wept when I saw it, because that, more than anything, meant I'd let go, that someone else could pick up the thread and braid it into something softer. I took long walks after that, unplugged, unhurried. People stopped recognizing me, or maybe they just didn't care anymore. Fame, I'd learned, was only sticky if you fed it. So I starved it, and instead I started feeding something else. I opened a small space. No signs, no branding, just an address whispered among those who needed it. It wasn't a clinic. Not exactly. It was more like a refuge, a place for people who'd left controlling relationships but didn't know what came next. There were books, blank journals, a kettle always on, and someone to listen without a dashboard calculating your pain. I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. One morning, a man walked in, hesitant, wearing a jacket too clean for someone unsure. He didn't look up at first, just stood by the shelf, fingers grazing the spine of a book he didn't open. When he finally turned, I already knew. Daniel, older, thinner, eyes that couldn't lie even when he tried. I didn't flinch, didn't speak. He sat. His hands trembled slightly. He didn't reach for mine. I heard. "This place doesn't ask for forgiveness," he said. I nodded. He looked around. "But maybe it teaches how to ask yourself for it." I stood, walked to the back, and returned with a folder. Inside was a single document, a contract, unofficial, untitled. But on the first page, in black ink, it said, "The price of loving wrong is learning to love again from the start." He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. He just read. And when he left, he looked lighter. The next day, he sent no message, but a donation came through, unnamed. The note simply read, "Thank you for giving me the mirror I never dared face." That night, as I closed the doors, I found a piece of paper left on the counter. Crayon handwriting, again, different this time. It said, "Forgive, not for them, but to free yourself." I smiled, not because I had all the answers, but because maybe I no longer needed them.